Welcome back to another episode of Common Language, where we break down today's complex policy issues into easy to understand ideas to help curious minds stay informed and engaged.
Today, we will be covering three key recent headlines, including Trump's primetime address, Blanche's confirmation hearings, and the latest round of tariffs. Breaking down why these stories matter for you, what they reflect about our democracy, including trust in democratic institutions, the relationship between the president and the Justice Department, and the global political landscape. Okay, Mac, let's talk Trump's
I'll kick
address
us
to the
off.
nation.
Yeah, let's get into it because I feel like no one really knew what to expect with this. And what was super interesting is that a couple of news stations decided not to broadcast this address, but essentially, Trump did deliver a primetime address outlining what his administration is describing as newly declassified intelligence informations on vulnerabilities within the US election infrastructure. They released a batch of new documents that basically purported that China had interfered into the election and argued that intelligence officials at the time failed to adequately disclose election security risks and said that they would be announcing investigations into how those findings were handled. This was all essentially a call to action to pass the SAVE Act, a major priority for Trump, which we have covered on this podcast a couple of different times. And he framed it as a necessary tool to strengthen election integrity and combat some of these challenges that he was releasing new information on. I will note here that election security experts and fact checking organizations noted that while the documents described known cyber threats and foreign interest in US election systems, they did not provide any evidence backing the claims of Trump that suggest that foreign actors altered any votes or changed the outcome of any past elections. So we've definitely heard this tune from Trump before about election fraud and the election being stolen. And we've definitely heard how much of a priority SAVE Act is for him. But what did you think of him, Case, making this a prime time address for the nation?
I thought a couple of things. Number one, going back to what you said about who broadcasted it and who didn't. So, Fox was the only news organization that broadcasted the entire thing. CNN started to and then cut after a certain time to start fact checking, and ABC and NBC declined to air. And I just think that this goes to show you that the people who are listening to Trump are the Fox News consumers, and he doesn't have a wider audience than that. So I do think that ultimately it's limiting for him to continue to only speak to this one audience. So sure, you can say he made this whole address just about the SAVE Act, which is a big deal, but he knows that midterm elections coming up are going to be so monumental for him and for the rest of his term that I think he feels justified in having this type of public response. But it begs the question, like, who's listening anymore? Who is listening to this? Because I did not listen to it. However, I did read the transcript. That's easier for
Okay.
me. And it's the same old playbook. He bashes the former administration, attacks trans people, attacks immigrants, and then goes into this diatribe of essentially untrue information. The best was he went on about burn bags. He said there were bags of items to be burned from the Obama administration, and somehow they weren't burned. And can you believe the lack of competency that, first of all, the bags were created and then they weren't even burned? It's comedy. This is comedy. This is not real. This is not real life. What was your take?
Yes, at this point, it did, in a way, feel like a stand-up show because it's just him delivering this address, even though many of the major broadcast networks are choosing not to air it, which I'm like, I wonder how precedented that is that news stations have declined to air. Okay, tell me.
So I will tell you that Sean Hannity was trying to say that it is completely however,
Okay.
there was an address by Biden right before his midterm elections that many news sources declined to show. So I'm not sure, quite frankly, how unprecedented it was. However, it was done at minimum to Biden not so
Okay.
long ago.
Yeah. Very interesting. And I think the thing that is sticking with me here, and that continues to be such a sticking point and dividing point, is this whole election being stolen in 2020.
Mhm.
And we'll get into this probably in our next item. But if you listen to any congressional confirmation hearing for the administration, you know the one question that a Democrat is going to ask is who won the 2020 election? And it's really starting to just drive me nuts because it's a test to see,
Yeah.
are they going to give in? Are they going to stay loyal to Trump? And this whole 2020 election stealing, can we just drop it? I'm over it. We're over it.
Over it. It's a
It's
litmus
20,
test. It's
it's,
become a litmus test for Democrats, and it's enough.
yeah, there's no new information,
Mm-mm.
no new evidence. Every credible fact checking organization and expert and analyst has debunked these claims. And so I don't know why we're still doing this. And I get it's all for this SAVE Act, which we've talked a lot about. Our feelings on that, I think, are pretty obvious. I actually think that this won't help move that bill along. I feel like a lot of people were turned off by this. It was just like, this seems like a circus.
Yeah, but again, it's just the Fox News listeners that are consuming this at this point. What he needs is a wider spread audience to put pressure to actually get some results. That's not what he's getting with this.
Yeah.
So I think that he has
Yeah.
already alienated enough of anyone who wasn't his base that it's like we're sitting back with our popcorn and just waiting for the next shoe to drop.
Certainly.
So, speaking of the next shoe,
Yeah.
let's go into the confirmation hearing of Mr. Todd Blanche this week because what a mess that was. So, the Senate Judiciary Committee held confirmation hearings for acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, who is one of Trump's closest legal advisors and former personal attorney. Much of the questioning centered on Blanche's relationship with the president and whether he would maintain the Justice Department's independence if confirmed. Senators also pressed him on issues including January 6th pardons, the handling of the Epstein files investigation, and broader concerns about political influence within the Justice Department. And the hearings really underscored broader debates over the appropriate relationship between the White House and federal law enforcement agencies, which I do really want to talk about as well, because yet another thing that Trump does is really make a new precedent in all of the things. So, just to talk about the relationship between the White House and the Department of Justice, really, historians consider it like a post Watergate relationship. And that has been the standard for every other presidency that we've had post Watergate, in that the Justice Department is more or less defined broadly by policy issues that are important to the president, but it's not specific people or actions or things that they're necessarily commenting on. So, like, for example, with the Bush administration, they were very focused on counterterrorism and border protections, right? And then with Obama, it was a lot more about civil rights and the drug prosecutions and lessening crimes for certain drug offenses. But it wasn't like specific, in which Trump really uses the Department of Justice as an extension of his own legal issues and antics. And he really cites Article 2 as his reasoning for doing that. But for me, it's just, I'm sorry, Rudy Giuliani Part 2, but now we're giving him a no official title. Like, that is what I see.
Yeah. I forget exactly the name of the episode. When we did the Epstein
Yeah.
files, yes, we talked about the role of the Attorney General and the Department of Justice. That was the kind of the context for how this agency is supposed to handle cases like the Epstein files and investigation. And obviously, Cam Bondi did a not so good job at that, which is why we are here now trying to confirm a new AG. And so I wouldn't say he has big shoes to fill, but I think there is a lot of pressure given how much she underperformed or did not meet the expectations for the president. And so I think there's going to be a lot of eyes on him, but he seems to be very close and he's been one of the loyalists in the Trump camps. Even when people were turning on him, he stood by his side. And I think this is a repayment and all of that. But the confirmation hearings also show that Trump, is starting to lose his handle on his party. I think at the beginning of the administration and during hearings for cabinet positions, the Republicans were kind of the benefit of the doubt and just moving people along, such as Pam Bondi. And now I think they're really like, okay, we're not just going to let you get a pass here. We're really going to be critical of you.
Yeah, which is really important considering that we have so many cabinet members who are making huge mistakes right now. I think all of them, I don't need to name names. I can just say at large, they're making a lot of mistakes. We can look at our produce right now. We can look at wars happening right now and know that there's a lot of people who are mishandling situations. And I also think that during the first round of confirmation hearings, we're not necessarily sure how far Trump was going to go, not 100% sure what he was going to really be capable of in terms of execution. And I think that this far into his presidency, this term, we are starting to see just how much damage is really getting done here. And so I like to think that there is some sort of pendulum swing on their side where they're like, okay, how much are we going to take here?
Yeah. And going off that other part you were saying too, is I think this is really going to define the second half of his term. This is kind of setting the stage for part two and what will be his final song or the end note of this administration. And I think this really gives us a window into the fact that any opportunity he has, he's really just going to stuff it with the loyalists and the people that are going to take the orders and run with them.
Mhm.
Because I think when Pam Bondi came in, I think there were even some people on the other side of the aisle that had hope that she would not be a blind loyalist to him because they respected her experience and her background. And she came up actually against more so Trump himself. Ultimately, that was her demise. But now he's just gonna put all of his friends. So
Yeah, yeah. To
that's where
mention
we are.
yeah, and not to mention the fact that Blanche really was his personal attorney, and he like, they've been to trial together. He had 2 of his cases dismissed before they even had to make it to trial. The one that they did go to trial on was for the hush money, and they lost that, but Pam Bondi didn't really work for Trump specifically to defend him in that way.
True.
So that's also why I still feel like this Rudy connection is so strong because it's no, Rudy wasn't a cabinet member. He didn't have that type of position, but he still was definitely privy to things as Trump's personal attorney. But now it's like this is magnified. And what we've seen from Blanche too is just he's a lot more of an action guy. Where I do think, to your point earlier with Pam, she was trying to be in Trump's pocket and also still trying to figure out her own approach,
Yeah.
and that was her demise, but this guy's no problem just being an executor, so that part makes it scarier, and I do think that the Republicans have to wake up.
Definitely. All right. Moving on to our third and final item for today. And again, nothing new coming out on this one. We've covered it before, and here we are again. What is it? Can't teach an old dog new tricks. So we're pulling out the same playbook, but this time it's about tariffs. So the Trump administration announced a new round of tariffs on imports from about 60 of our trading partners, and this is going to replace the temporary tariffs that Trump put in place when the Supreme Court knocked down his other tariffs. And so these new duties will essentially be in the double digit figures. And Trump is using Section 103 of the Trade Act of 1974 to justify these tariffs. This is the same kind of precedent or law that he used in his first term for tariffs and was ultimately successful in that. And so the tariffs cover a vast majority of US imports while exempting products such as energy and certain agricultural goods, but impact other goods like alcohol and pharmaceutical drugs. This move represents the administration's effort to rebuild their tariff strategy after the SCOTUS decision. But it's coming with, of course, some backlash. A lot of people, especially trading partners, are saying that this is unjust and unnecessary and saying that they will retaliate. And then some other analysts are saying he's not really going to fully carry this out to the full extent. It's more of a negotiation tactic that he's trying to deploy at the moment, while others are saying no, he's serious about this, and if he continues down this path, it could result in harming American workers and our economy.
It does really just feel like vu. Like we've
That's the
already
word.
done this, like truly. And it didn't work the first time. We saw that. And by the way, like within the business community, we've gotten refunds from tariffs already. They've had to issue refunds. What I think the caveat here that is important to talk about is that Trump is putting these tariffs in response to forced labor and accusing these countries of basically having poor, ill compliant labor force and practices, and that being the reason for these tariffs. And I just feel like that is really so shady. He's such a shady dude. He's like, you guys actually are basically all using slave labor, and so we will not be a part of that. Oh, now you have a moral high ground? How long has it been? Are you kidding me? That part really was insane to me because I just feel no, you found a legal loophole that you think is going to work this time. So that's why I'm down this road again because you were so upset about your tariffs being struck down. He still feels like this is the best way to boost our economy and put America first and like strong arm everybody and strong arm the world to believe in him and us. And again, going back to the ideas of reclaiming America as a superpower and just like having it all be about that he's so focused. And I really do think that because the Supreme Court struck down the tariffs the first time, he like he just doesn't want he doesn't want to be wrong. So
Right.
we're just doing whatever we can to justify that and have him be in the right. And honestly, I think we're such a joke on the global scale at this point that, yeah, I'm sure that we are upsetting people. Are they surprised though? No.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do feel like this is just souring the already decaying relationship with many of our global trading partners, especially during a time right now where it's just like, why is this necessary? This is just going to hurt us more than it's going to help us. But I do think that this really has to do more with the win,
Yeah.
right? Once he says, I will say this for better or for worse, once he says he's going to do something or is committed to an idea, a policy, whatever, he's digging his heels in and will not let up. And if a Supreme Court verdict isn't going to stop you, I don't think anything will. I think he will find any loophole, any policy, and, retwist it and spin it however he can to accomplish what he wants to accomplish through
Mhm.
these tariffs. And so I think, and I feel probably kudos to us, and I would love to rerun the tape. I feel like we said this before. We've been covering tariffs. And so a part of that, we covered the Supreme Court decision and how they knocked it down. And we were pontificating on what comes next. And we were like, this isn't the end. This is not, he's not going to just take this lying down. We were right. And
Lo and
here we are again.
behold.
And it does feel like deja vu. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, lo and behold, it's just classic. He can't take no for an answer, and he won't. And his comfort level is lying, cheating, stealing. So it's like whatever he needs to do to get from point A to his goal of point B is fair game for him.
Yeah. Yeah. And it looks like he's doing it at any cost because the poll numbers are horrible. The souring relationships with others in his party continues to be on decline. And I think many people are like, at this point, this isn't helping us.
Mm-mm.
Clearly, this is so totally dug in.
Yeah, to your point too, the polling numbers show that Americans don't care about the tariffs also. We're
Yeah.
not down. So it is funny the way that the things that he chooses to double down on are very just again whatever he wants, which goes back to what we were saying last episode is the man doesn't even do his job. He shows up
Right.
to just appease himself and his buddies and just make money, and that's it because he's not doing his job, period.
Get to work.
Yeah, get to work. While the president is not at work, we are hard at work. We will continue to be here to cover everything. And please don't forget to leave us a review. Find us on social common language pod. We are so thankful. And that's it for us.
Bye.
Bye.